Time is ready. We are already on live. So let me start formally. Ladies and gentlemen, I welcome all of you to this webinar. My name is Nuran Nabi. I am the moderator. And this seminar is organized by, as I said, Violence Free Secular Global Forum for Violence Free Secular and Democratic Bangladesh. This is our fourth seminar. The title of today's seminar is Success in Combating Terrorism in Bangladesh and its Implications for Security in the Region and Beyond. We have four distinguished panelists. I will introduce each of them when they speak. They will discuss various aspects of this title. The first panelist will be Dr. MD Shariful Islam. He is an associate professor in the international relation at the University of Rajshahi, Bangladesh. His research interests include Bangladesh foreign and security policy. And next speaker will be Chris Brown. He is a world renowned security analyst. And next speaker would be ABM Nasser, Professor ABM Nasser. He's from North Carolina Central University. And our last speaker would be Paulo Casaca. He's from Portugal and lives in Lisbon, in Belgium. So I would like to now invite our first speaker, Mr. Shariful Islam. But before that, I would like to give you an introduction about the topics today, and it will take few minutes. Under the leadership of Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, Bangladesh was created to establish a secular and democratic society. However, the local and international anti-liberation forces conspired and assassinated Bangabandhu in 1975, and they tried to reverse the ideological course from secular democratic society to non-secular undemocratic society using terrorism. Since then, the secular and democratic ideology has been led by Awami League leader and current Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, and the non-secular and undemocratic ideology has been led by BNP leader Khaleda Zia and their ally Jamaate Islam. They used violence to rule the country, and also they used violence to gain to the power, as they have been doing since October 28. Bangladesh has experienced terrorism in the past, conducted by several different organizations. Current Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina herself was the target of assassination several times, almost 17 times, including grenade attack on 21st August. In the past, both ISIL and other international terrorist organizations had claimed to be active in the country. However, Bangladesh government believes that they mainly operated through their local affiliates. Current Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina adopted zero tolerance towards extremism and terrorism after came to power. She adopted bold counter-terrorism strategy and redoubled its efforts with concerted counter-terrorism campaign. She has been successful in neutralizing terrorism. All studies, including a recent report from US government State Department on Bangladesh terrorism, they showed that there is a steady decline in terrorism and fatalities in Bangladesh. That's a good news. The extraordinary success of current Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina in combating terrorism not only helping in security and sustainable economic development in Bangladesh, but also it has positive implications for security in the region and beyond. So before the national election, this topic is very much relevant. Now I would like to request Dr. Islam to give the opening speech. Dr. Islam. And as I mentioned, he's a young associate professor from Russia University, Bangladesh. Dr. Islam.
Thank you, sir, for giving me the floor. Respected moderators, sir, respected co-panelists, and distinguished guests and audiences. Greetings from Bangladesh. Uh, I was told to speak on Bangladesh's zero tolerance policy regarding terrorism and its implications in the region and beyond. Regarding this topic, I was wondering that where is Bangladesh located in the context of global terrorism index? Then I looked at recently published global terrorism index 2023, where I found that in 2022 the United States experienced 8 terrorist attacks, while the European Union experienced 78 terrorist attacks. On the contrary, Bangladesh experienced only 2 terrorist incidents with no deaths. So in US there were 11 deaths, but in Bangladesh there was no death. In that report, it was also said that, I quote, Bangladesh was the second most improved country in regards to impacts of terrorism. So Bangladesh was the second most improved country in the index. So from this report, we can argue that or claim that Bangladesh was more safer to the United States or even to European Union. But my question was that how did Bangladesh do that? So in that context, my as my moderators are already mentioned, U.S. State Department's recently published report on terrorism 2022 on Bangladesh, where it mentioned that, I quote, in 2022, Bangladesh experienced few instances of terrorist violence as authorities continued to pursue militants rigorously. So this is the point that Bangladesh government continued its rigorous policy to tackle terrorist incidents in the country. And in the report, it is also mentioned that PM Sheikh Hasina and other Bangladeshi government officials frequently emphasized Bangladesh's zero tolerance policy on terrorism. That means Bangladesh has been maintaining this policy of zero tolerance when Sheikh Hasina regime came into power in 2009. And from this policy, we can look at several implications. But before going to that, Mike, another question was why zero tolerance policy? So in that question, I found that there are several factors or dimensions that played role to the formulation of that policy. First, the personal experience of Bangladesh Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, as moderators are said, that she was faced 17 times of terrorist attacks to her life, and her family was brutally killed in 15 August 1975. So Sheikh Hasina, from her experience, she knows the severity of terrorism and its consequences. And when Sheikh Hasina government came to power in 2009, the regime identified terrorism as a severe threat. Thus, Sheikh Hasina, I mean, identified terrorism as a personal threat, as a national threat, as well as regional security threat, as well as international security threat. Why I'm saying so? Let me give you a few instances. In 2010, at the 65th session of the United Nations General Assembly, Sheikh Hasina recalled that, I quote, as victims of repeated terrorist attacks, my family and I know this menace. Clearly, our rejection of terrorism is total, as is our determination to eliminate it all of its forms. Unquote. In 2017, again, at the United Nations General Assembly, Sheikh Hasina again pronounced that terrorism and violent extremism have become a major threat to peace, stability, and development. Again, in 2021, Sheikh Hasina is saying to the United Nations General Assembly that, I quote, threats to terrorism and violent extremism jeopardize peace and security in many parts of the world. We therefore maintain a zero tolerance policy in that regard, unquote. So, how a leader of a particular country perceives terrorism, that matters. I mean, Sheikh Hasina is identifying terrorism as a threat to the peace, to the prosperity, as well as to the development, not only for our country, I mean for Bangladesh, but also for the region and the world. So this is the reason Sheikh Hasina government or Bangladesh followed zero tolerance policy regarding terrorism. Second, if you look at history, I mean, when Sheikh Hasina government came power in 2009, after that, in 2010 at United Nations General Assembly, Sheikh Hasina openly said that, I quote, terrorism will not be allowed on the soil of Bangladesh. So that is really important, a strong message to the world community that Bangladesh will not allow its soil to conduct or undertake any kind of terrorist incidents. So that really matters. Again, in 2011, she also highlighted that our government has a zero tolerance policy towards terrorism. That means not only at national level but also at international level, Sheikh Hasina government has been maintaining, or Bangladesh under Sheikh Hasina has been maintaining this zero tolerance policy of terrorism. Now, if I ask, what's the point? Then I found several implications of such kind of policy. For instance, when Sheikh Hasina visited New Delhi in 2010, Sheikh Hasina said that Bangladesh will not allow its territory to be used for terrorist activities against any country in the neighborhood or around the world. And I can give you this assurance that Bangladesh is committed to eliminate all forms of terrorism from within its territory. This was the declaratory postures of Sheikh Hasina. But if we analyze the operational policies of Bangladesh, Bangladesh really did that. What Sheikh Hasina said, she did that. I mean, Bangladesh soil was not used further to you for any terrorist incidents. I mean, to harm other countries, other country. In this context, let me quote Mahbuz Anam, the editor and publisher of the Daily Star, who wrote an opinion piece at the Strait Times on 25th March 2017. So in this opinion piece, Mahbuz Anam said that Khaleda Zia government had allowed insurgents from the northeast in a mistaken policy to keep pressure on India, and which made wariness to India, and which became a severe threat to India's security. But when Sheikh Hasina government came power in 2009, some Indian insurgents were arrested in Bangladesh and were handed over to India. And again, let me cite another example. In April 2010, both Bangladesh and Indian governments took firm actions against militants from India's northeast. Notably, Bangladesh security forces launched massive operations against the militants. For instance, Sheikh Hasina regime addressed India's major security concerns by arresting and handing over top, that's called United Liberation Front of Assam, that's called ULFA. ULFA insurgent group leaders, for instance, ULFA chief Arvind Rajkhoa in 2009, who was leading ULFA for 3 decades. And Bangladesh also handed over ULFA General Secretary, that's called Anup Chetia, to India in November 2015. So this is how Bangladesh addressed security concerns of India, because India was facing a security threat from its northeast for several decades. Uh, and if you look at India's policy and academic community, it was widely accepted. I mean, Bangladesh's contributions to address India's security concerns. For instance, in March 2013, during his visit as the Indian president in Bangladesh, Pranab Mukherjee appreciated the contributions of Bangladesh to address the cross-border security concerns for India. Again, on 8 June 2015, in its editorial, the Indian Express, one of the leading English dailies in India, notes that, I quote, the Bangladesh PM's unreserved cooperation on terrorism has been key to constructing a genuine partnership between Delhi and Dhaka. Finally, I want to quote another recent example. In June 2022, former Director General of National Security Guard of India, Joyanto Narayan Chaudhary, he told that, I quote, all the trouble we had in the Northeast has been controlled and managed, partly because of Bangladesh. And almost every state in Northeast is now in peace. He also highlighted that at all levels, Bangladesh has so far been an outstanding and amazing partner of India on security issues. No one has done as much for the Northeast as Bangladesh. So I want to repeat it. No one has done as much for the Northeast as Bangladesh. So from this quotation, we can easily understand the contributions of Bangladesh on the regional security threats. And to address cross-border terrorism, Bangladesh and India has cooperated. If you look at in 2010, 2013, as well as in 2015, Bangladesh and India signed several agreements and MOUs regarding terrorism matters. And that helped or that gave legal as well as frameworks to deepen Bangladesh-India security cooperation. Finally, I want to say that what are the benefits in the region and beyond. So in that question, I found that, or as a student of international relations, I always find that while there is security, there is peace, and while there is security, there is prosperity, there is development. So we can say that security is a precondition for peace, prosperity, and development. So, the impressive socio-economic development in the northeastern region of India, as well as in Bangladesh, it has been possible due to the zero tolerance policy of terrorism of Bangladesh under the current regime, or that's called Sheikh Hasina regime. And I want also reiterate that other South Asian countries have also been benefited from Bangladesh's zero tolerance policy of terrorism. For instance, the rise of terrorism or extremism, violent extremism, would be or could be a regional threat to security, a regional threat to prosperity, a regional threat to development. So this is my point that Bangladesh's policy helped not only Bangladesh but also for the region. Now, if I look at the beyond, for instance, I would like to quote just two reports. In the United States Country Reports on Terrorism 2011 and Country Reports on Terrorism 2012, Bangladesh's cooperation with the United States in combating transnational terrorist groups were highly acknowledged. Again, former US ambassador to Bangladesh, her name was Marcia Barnicat, she said that, I quote, Bangladesh has remained a strong partner in the fight against terrorism. And Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina herself is a very, very strong leader in the fight against terrorism. That means from this quotation also we can understand that Bangladesh not only contributed to address the security threats of India or terrorist threats of India, but also it helped to the superpowers like the United States. And United States terrorism reports, it is clearly manifested that Bangladesh did a great job, particularly under the Sheikh Hasina government or under this regime, to address regional as well as international security threats. So my conclusion is that Bangladesh under Sheikh Hasina regime followed a strong zero tolerance policy of terrorism that not only helped Bangladesh but also helped in the region as well as beyond. Thank you so much indeed for listening to me.
Thank you, Dr. Islam, for your excellent presentation. And indeed, this zero tolerance on terrorism helping not only Bangladesh, also helping the region, especially with India. And also, you contrasted the policy of Khaleda Zia and Sheikh Hasina, which is important because of this, ahead of national election. And each panelist will get around 10 minutes, and after that we'll have time for discussion or comments. So I'd like to invite next Chris Blackburn. As I mentioned, he's a political analyst with strong emphasis on counterterrorism and security. He provided analysis and the advice to NGOs, law firms, political campaigns, think tanks, private organizations. Since 2001, Chris has worked closely with political leaders and security professionals from around the world. He has briefed US senators, congressmen on security related topics. Now I'd like to invite Chris to make his analysis. Chris.
Hi, Thank you, Nuran Nabi and ABM Nasir for organising this event today. I think Bangladesh is coming to another crossroads, especially as we're leading up to those elections in January. Bangladesh has done extremely well on the counterterrorism front. And as Dr. Islam said, recently the US State Department's Bureau of Counterterrorism hailed Bangladesh's strong leadership for having zero tolerance for extremism and terrorism in Bangladesh. And we've also seen international donors and cooperation. We saw an increase from sort of CT, counterterrorism, and CVE, countering violent extremism programs from international partners came after the Holy Artisan attack in 2016. So we've seen a lot of awareness and training and vocational skills. There've been youth outreaches and other programs designed by the international community to really help Bangladesh combat radicalism. And I think it has been extremely important, especially when we've seen like a model in sort of Pakistan, where in 2006 we had the Policy Exchange in the United Kingdom, which is a major think tank, organized a conference on Bangladesh as it was coming up to the elections. And they had our sort of panel. We had Hussein Haqqani, who was the head of the Hudson Institute's study on Islamist trends. And we both came to the conclusion that there was a Pakistanization of Bangladesh. Now, what did that mean? The Pakistanization of Bangladesh meant that there were people actually within the security structure of Bangladesh who were engaged in funneling money and helping train extremists. Now, that at the time, that after obviously 9/11, so 4 years after, we were seeing that Pakistan and elements within Bangladesh were actively working to cause mayhem. So how did Sheikh Hasina and her vision, that this her charter for change, and with a little bit of work from the caretaker government, who really started this process off, was the international community and Bangladesh and Sheikh Hasina decided they needed to really struggle against the national security apparatus, and we saw that there were there, and especially when we saw the Chittagong Arms Hall, when this caretaker government and Sheikh Hasina then decided to bring those cases against people. We saw people from the National Security Agency and we saw people from DGFI who actually went to prison for being involved in those types of activities. So Sheikh Hasina has a major role in that part. So anyway, on to the topic. We've seen lots of international cooperation from Bangladesh. The Institute for Strategic Dialogue, the ISD, and the Strong Cities Network have been helping train Bangladesh on resilience. The Counter-Terrorism Forum, which operates under the United Nations and was really helped set up by the US State Department, that's also been working to help strengthen Bangladesh. And the EU and the UK and others have been in support. Now, Bangladesh is the fourth largest Muslim majority country in the world, and it was previously in the spotlight a few years ago because of growing political and religious violence. And these had been increased after the war crimes tribunals. However, what we've seen is, and I think Dr. Islam mentioned it right, the Global Terrorism Index, which is run by the Institute for Economics and Peace, now has Bangladesh actually in a better position than the United States and the United Kingdom in their recent report. So that is major progress for Sheikh Hasina and the Bangladeshi security forces. So today I want to talk about waves of radical Islamist violence in Bangladesh, because I think that's very important. We've got to understand the narrative. And as Dr. Islam said, we've got to look at some of the personal issues, the political issues, which are quite pertinent to extremism in Bangladesh. There's been a few Bangladeshi political scientists that study extremism, and they look at the micro, but they don't really look at the macro, or they deliberately omit it somehow. There was a report by the Resolve Network which looked at, they said that there's been 5 distinct generations of radical Islamists in Bangladesh, but I'm not sure I actually agree with that. So I'm going to look at the increasing distinctions and compare them, and look at why some of the major trends, especially on the personal and political at a micro level, get missed. And I think these are very important. So for me, the 3 is what would be the number 1 is the proxy paramilitaries of Jamaat. and how al-Badr and al-Shams were used during 1971 as proxy extremists, because that is the essence, that is the beginning of real extremism in Bangladesh. That what happened in 1971, the genocide, is the most, it shapes everything in Bangladeshi life and politics. And then number two, I would say it would be the return of the ISI backed and Afghan backed returnees that came back from the Afghan Soviet jihad, and how those groups then built up GMB and the HUJB. I think that's the second most important. And then on to the third, which is the current wave, which was shaped by the US led war on terrorism and what was happening within the BNP Jamaat government of 2001 to 2006. So those are the three sort of waves that I think Bangladesh extremism is built around. But these are built around three main events. So I've put the main events and the ones I want to highlight as one, the Hawababan plot which was the grenade attack on Sheikh Hasina on the 21st of August 2004, and it was also one of the largest national security trials in history. And what we saw was that elements within the security apparatus, elements within the political apparatus, were working hand in hand with extremists from the HUJB, the Harkatul Jihad Islami Bangladesh, that these groups were working almost like state-sponsored. They were state-sponsored extremists. So when we said that there was a Pakistanization of Bangladesh happening, it really was. So I think for Sheikh Hasina and others in the security apparatus to address that problem, that has been one of the biggest events for me. So the second event, and it was quite closely related to the number one, which is that the Chittagong Arms Hall in 2004, where we saw that what had happened is Pakistan's ISI were using ULFA, the United Liberation Front of Assam. They were using ULFA to be the spearhead of working with radical groups who wanted secession and separatism in northeast India, and they were also funneling money to Islamist groups. So ULFA in the last few years, people that their leadership who've been arrested have said that basically the Pakistan ISI and elements within Bangladesh in the history of Bangladesh were basically supplying that effort. So I think when I look at how I see sort of reports on Bangladeshi extremism, if you miss out those major events, I don't know how you can come to any kind of conclusion on the sort of the extremism within Bangladesh. So then the third event that I think is probably the most important, and that was in 2015. There was an expulsion of Pakistani diplomats who were actively financing Al-Qaeda fronts. And I think when we look at trust in the region, yes, we do have a lot of cooperation between the West and Bangladesh, but there's growing voices within Bangladesh and India who say literally that the Western countries are not taking our internal security seriously enough. They didn't condemn Pakistan's behavior, and they didn't condemn or sanction Pakistan for backing the Taliban. So there is a lot of distrust in South Asia, and I think that's going to be the next sort of the narrative that we find on the international stage, and it will affect India, it will affect Bangladesh, it will affect Pakistan, is that simply the West turns a blind eye on occasions with real events that happen on the ground. And I think that's going forward. We've got to change that. So I think from 2013, when we had the War Crimes Tribunal, there was an increase in a fertile ground for Al-Qaeda and Islamic State to make a move into Bangladesh. However, the government and security agencies acted swiftly, neutralizing command modules of both groups. Now, many analysts blame the War Crimes Tribunals for that increase in the sort of the kickback, the backlash. However, there is a genuine need for Pakistan and Jamaat-e-Islami figures to be held accountable for their behavior. So Al-Qaeda and ISIS took advantage of that upsurge in Islamist militancy. However, the Bangladeshi government, working with partnerships around the world, managed to get a handle and have kept Bangladesh on a relatively stable level. So when Bangladeshi police were dealing with the Al-Qaeda fronts like the Ansarullah Bangla team, ABT, who were going around killing people who wanted secularism in Bangladesh and people who supported sort of gay rights and all those kinds of things, we saw these Pakistani diplomats were actively funding these groups who were engaged in targeting of the secularists and the bloggers. So I think that narrative and that sort of fact is being missing within this sort of macro strategic level when it comes to the counter-terrorism views focusing on Bangladesh. So I think there has been an increased assertiveness of local chapters of Islamic State and Al Qaeda, but the Bangladeshi government and security services have managed to deal with them pretty well. I also think, and I think from Nura Nabi and him saying about Bangladesh's history and need for a moderate and secular and progressive country, that there is a growing majority in Bangladesh who completely reject extremism, and I think that's why we have to then look at the factors such as state radicalism or state sanctioned radicalism coming from Pakistan and other states. And I think what we're seeing, especially in relation to Ulfa, as we know, which has a hand in Islamic extremism and others, that Ulfa is now using China, the Chinese security wing, the MSS. Paresh Baru, the leader of Ulfa, is actually in China and has been backed. We knew that in the past there were allegations that the Chinese had given Ulfa weaponry, and we know that. However, what is happening now is Ulfa, the radical side of Ulfa, are in fact encamped in China. So that's going to become another big thing going forward. And whether or not the Indian attempts to sort of co-opt Ulfa and make peace deals with Ulfa, and because as Dr. Islam has said, there's been a real change of the security apparatus in the northeast of India, and what we're seeing is a real element of growth where now countries such as Bhutan, Nepal, Bangladesh, and India saying we want to work together for prosperity. These areas that were caused by the radical elements in DGFI and the ISI have relatively been contained. In international cooperation has worked in Bhutan. There was Operation Clear Out in 2003, where Ulfa modules that had set up bases there after obviously Bangladesh was starting to get involved in tackling these groups. That Ulfa then went up into Bhutan, and the government of Bhutan took Ulfa out, and that's when they obviously ended up going to China. So we do see a lot of good cooperation in the region, and I think we've got to applaud Sheikh Hasina for leading that charge. And she's had Emmanuel Macron, the French Prime Minister, and subsequent British Prime Ministers have said that Sheikh Hasina's zero tolerance has really helped the international community, and I think she deserves plaudits for that. So I would like to really get to the bare bones of things and to understand. So we've sort of been through the history, and as I said, there was a real build-up of Islamist activity after 1971. However, they got sporadic and got banned and are thrown into. A lot of them went into exile, and a lot of them went to the United States and the United Kingdom. There are convicted war criminals in both countries, and I think that's going to be something going ahead. It will be quite interesting to see how the US and Bangladeshi dynamics on that war crimes issue is resolved, if at all. So that's an issue. I think basically what we've seen is Jamaat-e-Islami are also taking, because their leaders who were involved in war crimes have been held to account. Jamaat-e-Islami is feeling that it needs to have radical reform within itself. So we've seen that a younger generation are rejecting the old school. How will that play into extremism in Bangladesh? We don't know. Will it make groups such as Neo-GMB and GMB, will they take heed of that sort of reform movement within Jamaat, and will they change? We don't know. So I think, to conclude, I think what we've seen is the government of Bangladesh has faced sometimes a lot of criticism and a lot of challenges, but they've generally been, if you could say that the Bangladeshi model, comparing it to other models in the region, Bangladesh has been phenomenal. And I'm glad that it's getting praise from the United States and others for doing that. And it has been a very difficult journey. So these authorities are broke modules. We're seeing increased cooperation. We're seeing Islamists being exposed. There was an arrest of an Al Qaeda official in India, and he said that basically GMB and Islamic Chatra Shabir, the Jamaat student wing, had been working in tandem with Al Qaeda to spread radicalism around the world. So I think when people are making, and I heard it recently at a major conference, somebody said, "Oh, Jamaat Islami isn't involved in terrorism." Well, we know that's simply not true, because we know through when Jamaat were in power that they were helping with Islamists. We know that some of their leaders were involved with the Chittagong Arms Hall. We also had sort of indications that they were involved in the Howard Babin plot, because we know that those that were convicted within the Bangladesh Nationalist Party, Tariq Rahman and Lutfazman Babar. So these were actually a case where the BNP was being more radical than Jamaat, which was quite an interesting statement. So in conclusion, I think that the threat is always there. It doesn't matter what country, but I think there are indicators that everybody's working and everybody wants Bangladesh to succeed. And these coming elections will be quite interesting to see how countries react to the elections. And we know the US has got a hard line, but we've seen that Emmanuel Macron doesn't agree with US tactics about sanctioning, and he wants cooperation rather than confrontation. And he openly said that while he was in Dhaka, he openly said the US methods were bullying. So I think there's a lot to chew on going forward on the counterterrorism front and the political front. But I think overall, Bangladesh has made massive strides, and I think any historian or any real counter-terrorism practitioner would say that Bangladesh has done everything right when there's been nations who've done everything wrong. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris, for your excellent presentation, especially insight analysis, how Pakistan, especially the ISI playing role in Bangladesh. That is very important. And as you rightfully mentioned, that for micro controlling or micromanaging this anti-terrorism in Bangladesh, we must take into consideration of role of Jamaat Islam and Chatra Shibir, their role, how they are getting help from ISI, and how they are doing terrorism in Bangladesh. I have witnessed the atrocity, terrorism of Jamaat Islam and Chatra Sangha. That time, the student front's name was Chatra Sangha, now which is Chatra Shibir. Their atrocity during 1971 war, and they did not stop. They are still continuing in different disguise. Thank you, Chris, anyway. Now, our next speaker is Professor ABM Nasir. He is a professor of economics at the University of Carolina Central University. He is also a human rights activist. Personally, he fought against military dictatorship in Bangladesh in 1980s as a student activist, and he is also one of the organizer of this forum. Now I give floor to Professor ABM Nasir. Dr. Nasir.
Thank you, Dr. Nuranavi, and distinguished panel and the audience. In my presentation today, I just want to provide some information on U.S. conflicting message that relates to U.S. national security interest. So, coming back to South Asia, over the last decades, South Asia has gone through a massive transformation in opposite directions. In one direction, Bangladesh and India have achieved an impressive economic and social performances. On the other hand, after 20 plus years and $2.3 trillion of US investment, the US pullout has delivered Afghanistan to the Taliban, and severe political and economic crises have engulfed Pakistan and Sri Lanka. Most recently, Maldives election is owned by a Chinese-linked political party. So zero return from US investment in democracy project and nation building in Afghanistan, and unstable strategic partnership with Pakistan surely creates a dilemma for the US strategic interest in South Asia. Yet, it also opens a great prospect for a Bangladesh US strategic partnership, beneficial not only to Bangladesh and also to the US national interest, and also to the interest of the entire South Asia region. The United States is the largest destination of Bangladesh government's products, the third largest provider of development assistance in Bangladesh, the largest provider of assistance for Rohingya rehabilitation process, the third largest source of the net foreign direct investment inflows in Bangladesh. So Bangladesh being the only friendly and secular Muslim country in the region could be a formidable US ally to build a strong economic anti and anti-terrorism coalition. But the recent US stand on political development based on false dilemma seems to be hell bent on holding a free and fair election in Bangladesh while disregarding the historical context of free election won by radical Islamic coalition in 2001 and the intended consequence aftermath on the liberal and secular forces and on the minority communities. But if you think about free election and fair election, who doesn't want it? For example, in Bangladesh, Marxists and Maoists who once espoused China type communist revolution want democracy in Bangladesh. The civil society group who supported a military backed government in 2007 want it, and anti democratic radical Islamists who committed genocide in 1971 to prevent the birth of Bangladesh and endorse the Sharia want democracy in Bangladesh. But the fact is that neither was there ever a fair election in Bangladesh, nor do free election guarantees peace and stability, especially if won by radical coalition not committed to democracy. The BNP Jamaat coalition won the 2001 election, which was widely praised by global community as competitive, yet all hell broke loose after the coalition win. The BNP Jamaat coalition led violence right after their election victory and during 2001-2006 against religious minorities displaced around 300,000 Hindus. The local and global anti-US terrorist groups thrived under the direct patronage of the senior leadership of the BNP Jamaat coalition. One such group is Harkatul Jihad, alias Huji, Bangladesh, founded by three Afghan veterans, Mufti Abdul Rauf, Maulana Abdul Salam, and Mufti Abdul Hanan in 1992. Right after the founding, Huji declared that Bangladesh should become an Islamic state. A leader of Huji, Fazlur Rahman, and other jihadists from Pakistan and the Middle East signed Osama bin Laden's 1998 fatwa calling for jihad against the US and its ally. Huji became more active in Bangladesh after 9/11 terrorist attack in the United States under the leadership of Mufti Hanan, who had established strong link with Lashkar-e-Taiba in Pakistan. In February 2002, Huji attacked the American Center in Calcutta, killing four people, four police constables and a security guard, and injuring over 20 people in the first such strike on a target in India. On May 24, 2004, Huji conducted grenade attack on the then British High Commissioner Anwar Chowdhury in Sylhet, Bangladesh, killing three and injuring 50 people, including the British High Commissioner. Then on August 21, 2004, the terrorist outfit conducted the worst terrorist incidents in Bangladesh history by its grenade attack on the Awami League's anti-terrorism rally in Dhaka, killing 24 and injuring 500 people, including the current Prime Minister of Bangladesh. Mufti Abdul Hannan later confessed to be the leader behind the attack and implicated current interim chair of BNP, Tariq Zia, former Home Affairs Minister Lutfuzzaman Babur, Deputy Minister of Abdul Salam Pinto, among other senior leaders of BNP. Another terrorist outfit, Jamaat ul Mujahid in Bangladesh, JMJB, also thrived under the direct patronage of the senior leadership of BNP Jamaat coalition, carried out massive bombing campaign by blasting 459 bombs across 64 districts simultaneously, killing 2 people and injuring 100. The mastermind behind the attack was the Shaykh Abdul Rahman and Siddiqul Islam, popularly known as Bangla Bhai. Bangla Bhai was a former Islami Chhatru Shibir leader, which is a student wing of Jamaat Islami. JB and Huji also carried out numerous attacks against institutions, individuals, and cultural activists under the direct patronage of the top leaders of ruling BNP Jamaat coalition. A June 21, 2007, Daily Star report mentioned that Tariq Rahman and several ex-BNP ministers directly patronized the outrageous operation of JMB in Rajshahi with full knowledge of the former Prime Minister Khaleda Zia. According to a crisis group report, since 2015, two other jihadist groups, JMB and Ansar Islam, have targeted foreigners, secular activists, and intellectuals, religious and sectarian minorities, and other perceived opponents with rising frequency. All this group has direct or loose ties with the BNP Jamaat coalition. There are other innumerable instances of connection between the BNP Jamaat led coalition and other regional terrorist organizations. A Times of India article on November 6, 2014, citing a central government security agency, mentioned that a faction of Ulfa, led by Paresh Barua, was gun running for the Jamaat Islami of Bangladesh. In addition to hardcore radical groups, other less violent radical groups are currently also demanding a free and fair election. Yet, they don't support democratic principles. They are anti-women, anti-free speech, including the Islamic Shashantantric Andolan led by Syed Rajaul Karim, who often espouses blasphemy law. The 2022 country report by the US Bureau of Counterterrorism mentioned that in 2022, Bangladesh experienced few instances of terrorist violence as authorities continued to pursue militants rigorously, particularly Al Qaeda affiliated groups, JMB, and ISIS affiliated JMB offshoots, and new JMB. Yet, the United States has been supporting the demand for a free and fair election by a political coalition with a history of political ties to anti-US global terrorist networks and terrorism activities against secular activists and religious and sectarian minorities. But what is the end game? What does US want? What if a free and fair election brings a fundamentalist Islamic coalition into power like 2012 Egyptian election? Elected in a free election, victorious Mohammed Morsi and affiliates of the Muslim Brotherhood and leader of the Freedom and Justice Party later tried to impose Sharia under democratic cover, only to be later deposed by a military dictator, General Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. It means that US now preferring to have religious militancy to political power through the free election or want some kind of military intervention. Neither is democratic. My question is, should not the US policy rather be fostering and strengthening a secular and violence-free democratic Bangladesh instead of solely focusing on holding a free election, which neither guarantees peace and stability, nor will it serve the US interest in South Asia. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Nasir, for your excellent analysis, especially role of state-sponsored terrorism in Bangladesh during the ruling of BNP Jamaat alliance. And this 21st August grenade attack, arms smuggling in this Chittagong area. There are many examples you cited, which have which shows that BNP Jamaat has a track record of sponsoring terrorism. So this is very important information, and Bangladesh people should remember before the election. Now, our next speaker, last speaker but not least, Paula Kasaka. He is the founder and executive director of South Asia Democratic Forum. He a think tank based in Brussels, Belgium. He is also a former Portuguese member of the European Parliament. So I should address him Honorable Kasaka. Please, floor is yours.
Well, Dr. Nabi, thank you very much for this invitation, for this introduction. And I am really very glad to be here on this initiative of the Global Forum for Violence-Free, Secular, Democratic Bangladesh. You mentioned the three pillars of what unites us when we think about Bangladesh. That we can't think about free and fair elections without these three pillars. It's certainly not a serious proposal to address one of the questions that was raised by the end. But let me take advantage of this position to be the last one speaking to to make some comments on the very important messages that all of the preceding speakers gave to us. So, Dr. Islam, your statistics are absolutely fundamental to understand what has been going on in Bangladesh. In less than 15 years, there was a complete transformation. Just to mention one of the most important academics that has been dedicated a lot of his time to terrorism in Bangladesh, Paul Cochrane, that made lots of studies in the West Point Combating Terrorism Center. Only to mention one of the most famous terrorist attacks that took place in August 2005. There were 479 explosions that took place within 7 minutes in nearly all of the corners of the country. This is a very telling sign of the state of terrorism in Bangladesh, and the reaction of the government, of the authorities. Mrs. Zia was immediately to say, "Oh, it's a conspiracy from Israel and from India," and only afterwards she had to admit, well, this was really a jihadi attack. And that she had to do something about it. Actually, as Chris very correctly said, it was the process of Pakistanization. It was exactly the same thing. It was to try to handle terrorists and to try to put them doing the things that the authorities thought would be good. I mean, to put bombs on to bomb opposition, to make mayhem in India, but not making too much mayhem within borders. This is a very complex exercise, and Pakistan was not able to fulfill it. And those who tried to copy it in Bangladesh did neither succeed. And so Bangladesh was actually one of the hotspots of international terrorism in the world. And it's no longer. And this is a tremendous victory. Something, as Dr. Islam, you said it all, but we have to repeat it. It's fundamental for Bangladesh, for the whole of the neighborhood, and for the international community. We should be all very thankful to the Bangladesh authorities for uh, this fantastic achievement. That's the point number one. Well, point number two is exactly this issue of the Pakistanization, because um, we have seen a campaign that wanted to institutionalize again the so-called caretaker government. That is actually something that is not in accordance with the present constitution. So when we saw a movement that was very surprisingly, and I will come back to this, supported by the United States and the West in general. Well, caretaker government. Well, there is one country where this sort of system exists. It's Pakistan, nowhere else. And as whoever has a bit of knowledge and understanding of the democratic process, this is something that works against the democratic system. This is a way for forces within the deep states to control the outcomes of elections. Of course, that has been the case for time and time again in Pakistan, and no one can ignore it. So to sponsor this as a democratic process is really quite unbelievable. And it is quite unbelievable not to be very clear on the conditions for having a democratic alternative. The number one, from the international community point of view, is obviously this one, to continue exactly the same policy of Sheikh Hasina, to not to make any concession to terrorism. I mean, this should not need any special explanation. It's obvious. It's obvious that vote by itself does not guarantee democracy. If you have violence, well, Hitler has been quoted there and again as the case in point. Of course, you can have something very opposite to democracy, as you did. Well, then most recently, as exactly as was correctly quoted by Professor Nazir, we had the Arab Spring. Actually, the United States, the administration, the Obama administration, were obviously fueling the Muslim Brotherhood chapter in Egypt to do what happened. And what happened was the contrary to democracy. And of course, we have to bear in mind that this Muslim Brotherhood is the same international organization that comprises Jamaat-e-Islam. It's the same. It's an organization that is against democracy. They might try from time to time, in the logic of taqiyya, try to fool people, but they are against democracy. They do not want any democracy nowhere in the world. They want the Islamic State. They have the same ideology as Al-Qaeda and all the rest. They didn't change. Sometimes they pretend to be more comprehensive, as, for instance, this famous letter of bin Laden to the Americans that was revived very recently, where even bin Laden pretends to be open and to be tolerant and so on. But I mean, we have seen that for ages. And who can believe this sort of attitude? No one seriously can. And nothing was guaranteed from the very same sources that presided to this outburst of terrorism in the beginning of the present century. Nothing makes believe, makes us believe that they changed their minds. Quite on the contrary, the tactics are the same, the violence is the same, the speech is the same, the reference to Pakistan is the same. But the United States, and yes, it is. I mean, it's very difficult to understand, as Professor Nazir was saying, as that considered Pakistan democracy, full democracy, very, very good democracy, not Bangladesh, but Pakistan, very good democracy. They have been fueling this idea of the caretaker government. They have been actually condoning with this violent strategy. And of course, people are just like, what is going on? They just are they just wanting to prepare another September 11? That's what they have in their mind. Well, I think, and this is the crux of the matter, is that we have really in the West a very soft protection against the vested interests, lobbies, Islamist lobbies. Whoever has money can go anywhere. And this is also true of politics. And this is our fragility. So here in the United States, Europe is not very different. I mean, the Qatar gate that has been very much talked about, but has been fundamentally silenced because the Qatar gate was an organized NGO supported by the specific network of organizations that were actually taking control of very important committees of the European Parliament. That's the essence of the Qatar Gate. It's not, the dollars that the euros that went to member of the Parliament A and B. It's not the most important. Most important is the political control by the Islamist forces of such important committees like the Subcommittee on Human Rights. If you read the literature that these NGOs were bringing, and all of them financed, of course, by the same network of these Cayman Island based funds that are called the Open Society Foundations, which actually, as an institution, this does not exist. But that's a small precision. They were the ones who were financing, and actually the journalists that were taking care of Qatar Gate were actually financed by the same by the same machine that were financing the NGOs that created the Qatar Gate. And one needs to read. They have hundreds of pages of reports, and they are very clear. Oh, Afghanistan. Oh, the United States have to go away. It's a no. It was a disaster. We have to turn the page. I mean, it was obviously a campaign that was making the policy of Qatar. Qatar bought the place in the European institutions to mimic its policy, to take control of Afghanistan. And Bangladesh was next in line. I mean, I saw that with my eyes when I got there. It's obviously Bangladesh, it's their major concern. Why? Well, Bangladesh has been decapitating the Islamist networks, actually literally as well, as we know. And this is something that the Islamists do not forgive. That's the problem, nothing else. Because obviously, whoever believes in democracy, like myself, wants to see a scenario where you have, a fair game between political forces that have different ideas on a lot of things, but not on the issue of secularism, that is, respect for other religions, not on the issue of violence, not that one wants to institute terrorism, not on the fundamentals of the existence of the country. If this is done, and the West could have had an enormous role there, well, then everything is fine. It's fantastic. The game will be going on well as in India. I mean, you have different uh, parties competing elections with no problem. Otherwise, this is a problem, and this is a problem for all of us, not only for Bangladesh, not only for the region, but for the whole of the world. And I am convinced that the people that are really pressing, making this policy of fermenting the very same that were responsible for terrorism in Bangladesh, they really are not acting on the interests, not of the United States, not of the European Union, nobody else in the West. Final point that actually was very much underlined by Paul Cochrane all the time. You know, the financing of terrorism. Actually, most of the financing that he found out was coming from the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom has been unwilling or incapable of stopping this flow of financial flow to terrorist organizations, and this is a big problem. And I think it has to be tackled as well. Thank you very much for the invitation, and now let's go for the debate.
Thank you so much. You have raised very important point. The financing of terrorism, terrorist activity by Islamic group. This misinformation, disinformation, they are doing everywhere against Bangladesh and other progressive forces, especially in USA, you mentioned in UK, England, and Professor Nasir mentioned in Egypt. So this is the main tool of the terrorist group to make misinformation and attack the progressive forces all over the world, including Bangladesh. So we have a very rich discussion. Unfortunately, we are out of time. We have several questions, but we cannot take all. At least I want to take the one question, which is presented to us by Dostogir Jahangir from Washington, D.C. I read his note. The Bureau of Counterterrorism's report for 2020 on Bangladesh suggests that the government, with assistance from USA, has been actively combating militants, leading to decrease a terrorist incidents. However, the concern raised at the political violence prior to general election is perceived as potential risk for the resurgence of militant groups. What is your opinion? He's asking this question to all. He usually, I think he referred to this violent and terrorist activity since 2000, since October 28 by opposition leader in the name of free and fair election campaign. So it's a open question to all you four. Anybody can respond. If not, then I will ask someone. So anybody volunteer? Okay, Chris and Dr. Islam.
Yeah, thank you.
First
I think
Chris, then Dr. Islam.
I think it's a very good question. But what I would say is, if we look at the history of Bangladesh, um, Bangladesh is actually there's been a few sort of issues. There was one that said if Islamists are given power, they will moderate, right? So we've seen it in Bangladesh that it didn't. Islamist militancy went through the roof. And then we also saw in the Gaza Strip, when Hamas have got power, we've now seen militancy's gone through the roof. It doesn't reduce the pothole theory where they said that if militants are given power and they're having to deal with mundane management, that they'll somehow reduce their radicalism. So you think, how does this revolve around the question? Because it does, because I think militants, no matter what, they love violence, they love confrontation. They're just the way they're hardwired. they'll find any excuse. So I think what we've seen is the October 28th violences, and I think this is very distressing for Bangladesh, is that there wasn't a condemnation. There should have been a blanket condemnation of political violence at the time, run by the United States, like we saw on Human Rights Day. That there should have been a global condemnation about the arson attacks, and there wasn't. And I think that's caused a lack of trust. And that lack of trust does, for many people, and especially radicals, sort of gives them the green light. Well, that means things are okay, and people will, if there is any violence in Bangladesh, radicals will naturally gravitate towards it. So I think the international community, if they want a violence-free, free and fair elections, they need to do more to call out when it is actually happening, whether it be by the BNP or by the state itself. I think if they're going to be firm and fair, they need to be a sort of a plague on all of the houses in Bangladesh. And I think the international community haven't helped.
Thank you. It's really unfortunate that the Western countries, including USA, European Union, they are not saying anything about this violence perpetrated since October 28, including arson, burning of buses, and also attacking the house of Chief Justice, etc. So yeah, I agree with you. Now, Dr. Islam.
I just someone
Okay, go ahead.
okay. Okay. I just want to add one point.
Dr. Islam was the next. Then you
Sorry.
Okay, no sir, no sir, it's fine.
fine. Okay,
It's fine, sir.
Go ahead,
Yeah.
please.
please go ahead.
Okay, so my point is that if you look at the history, I mean, in 2014 election, after 2014 election, there were mass scale of violence committed by BNP Jamaat regimes, and they burned many cars, many buses, and they buried many people. So many people are killed because of such kind of violences. But ultimately, when they saw that the people of Bangladesh, they are very peaceful people actually, so they don't love or they don't like the continuation of such kind of violence, such kind of incidences. So at last, what they did, I mean, they had to reject their such kind of violent activities or violent methods or violent strategies. So again, prior to this election, I mean, as you all mentioned that since October 28, I mean, again, these BNP and Jamaat people, they again undertaken lots of violent activities like arson attacks, burning of buses, and attacking on the house of the, I mean, Chief Justice. So such kind of violence were there. But unfortunately, we see that there were no strong reactions from the international community. So, as a student of international relations, I can say that I mean it's a I mean narrowly defined interest of might be some of the particular parties, and it's the politicization. Politicization because there is politicization of such kind of, I mean, what labeling or such kind of thing, because for instance, you can see that human rights works in one place but human rights doesn't work in other place. That means the definition of human rights is subjective or relative or something like that. So there is some politicization here that needs to be critically looked at. And again, I mean, but what we found, I mean, the violence attacks has been decreasing nowadays because the buses are running there because the people of Bangladesh realized that, or they accepted that. I mean the violence can't be an option. Can't be an option. So the Islamist groups or the BNP Jamaat groups or people, so they need to realize that violence can't be any option to take power or to go power. And my final point is that the international community must understand the essentiality of Sheikh Hasina regime, not only for regional peace and stability, but also for international security. For instance, if you look at the last 15 years, the Bangladesh's contribution to regional peace, regional security, international security, it is widely, I mean, laudable. So that needs to be taken into account by the international community. And in that context, my conclusion is that there is no alternative to Sheikh Hasina regime for Bangladesh's peace, prosperity, and stability, as well as regional stability and international stability. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Nasir. I think this will be the last. We are running
Just
out of
would
time.
like to add something uh, to the U.S. recent reports on from U.S. Bureau of Counterterrorism. Uh, I think it's something like sweetening the pot, like their action is not matched with their actual real action, not matched with their rhetoric. My concern is the U.S. is playing a game like uh, what happened during the financial crisis in 2006, 2007. U.S. State Department official in Dhaka and Washington D.C. playing like a loan officer. They're recommending policy, but the consequence of the policy in the future will not be the responsibility will not taken by them. So if Bangladesh fell into uh, some kind of religious fanatics groups like 2001, they will simply brush their hands, saying that we try to hold, ensure a fair election, free and fair election, and fair election doesn't happen in Bangladesh. Free election, and it's the people choice that the people brought back religious extremism, but after a few years they will start going against that uh, government. Now, what's the game here? Uh, Kugelman from Brookings Institution. Is that right, Chris? Kugelman? Mike?
Wilson Center.
Yes. Was that Wilson? He
Wilson
made
Center,
an
yes.
interesting comment in a newspaper interview that saying that, well, Bangladesh is not in the top priority as India is in South Asia. So US is looking after India's interest more than Bangladesh democratic and secular, violence-free democratic and secular interest. And this is a problem. And I want to add to Kugelman's comment that not only US don't have any interest in Bangladesh political development, but it I perceive that US State Department officials and some in Biden administration don't like Sheikh Hasina's government or her personality. Somehow I get that. But when you bring personality into political equation, that really is dangerous. It's not your personal action. It's the fate of an entire nation, 170 million people, and it's fate of U.S. population. I'm a U.S. citizen, came from Bangladesh. It's my fate. I could not go back to Bangladesh during 2013 and 14 because of terrorist threat. We were fighting for the war crime tribunal. We couldn't go back home. That's why I'm fighting for this. So it's my life. It's life of the Bangladeshi people. Majority of Bangladeshi people who don't want violence is people of South Asia. India's national security interest is the national security interest of Nepal. So US must understand that before they make some kind of policy action based on whim or not based on future direction, stability, peace and stability of South Asia and US national interests, this is going to backfire. I'm telling you.
Thank you. We are really out of time. After listening all the panelists' discussion, take-home message is following, as I understand. Bangladesh has become a role model for economic development under the leadership of Sheikh Hasina. Now, international organization, media, and government, they are saying that Bangladesh, under the leadership of Sheikh Hasina, has become now a role model for anti-terrorism activity. So this is a great achievement for and compliment for Sheikh Hasina. So thank you all again for your time and for your thoughtful discussion. I wish I can continue more. Maybe we'll meet again somewhere. So stay well, be blessed, and bye now. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.